Hey. Wait, where is she? Is my volume up? Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Excelente. This is so dope. I'm super excited. How are you, Hayley?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. I always love when I get to podcast with people I know absolutely nothing about. I looked at your Instagram, and I love the high outlook. It is beautifully laid out. I imagine your place is pristine. There's something about like everything has its place.
Somewhat, sometimes.
Hayley, please introduce yourself to the listeners out there, because I know you're a huge mental health advocate, but you know, give us a little bit about you.
Okay. My name is Hailey Kennedy. I'm 23. I was born in Calgary, Alberta, but I'm currently living in British Columbia, which is kind of Western Canada.
Yeah.
And I am a freelance digital illustrator and a mental health advocate.
Now, what got you into mental health? Why a mental health advocate?
So I myself have anxiety and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had it pretty much my whole life, but I was diagnosed when I was around 14 years old. So it's something I kind of grew up dealing with and learning how to deal with properly. And so that just kind of, when I first started creating art pieces kind of surrounding mental health and self-care, it was kind of a coping mechanism for myself, and kind of used it as a tool for my own recovery and my own healing process. But along the way, it also kind of became a tool for other people, and I found that it also helped them. So kind of I find talking about things like mental health and suicide and all that stuff, it makes it easier for everyone else to talk about it as well. Like just starting that conversation and letting other people know that they're not alone in what they're dealing with.
It's so fascinating how many people feel like they are alone in mental health struggle, when, you know, so many celebrities have talked about their mental health struggle. We've lost many celebrities to a lot of mental health issues, and but still, we all in our, you know, we get in our heads about it and think I'm the only one that can understand what I'm going through. And
it's a funny thing how, I mean, especially depression can kind of put you into that space where you just feel so closed off from everything else.
Yes.
And it can make you feel like you're totally alone, even if you have a support system around you. That's just part of the illness, unfortunately. But again, I feel like the big part of my artwork lately has been just kind of opening up that conversation, kind of in an approachable way. I know some people are still a little bit uncomfortable talking about things like that, but I feel like as a society, we are getting better at talking about these things. Yeah. And I feel like the more we do it, the easier it's going to get.
You're right. I was just talking to a friend of mine here in California, and I'm sure it's something that will start to spread throughout the country. The middle, I think it's middle school. I don't know if it's high school yet, but actually, is she in high school? It might be high school. But on the back of their ID now, they have the number to the suicide hotlines. Okay. And it's mandated by the state that every student ID, at least I think for high school, it's on the back of their ID now. So you're right, the conversation is getting easier and easier, and more people are talking about it.
And I mean, with even having that number on there, it opens up, it kind of increases the accessibility for people to find help if they feel they need it. You know?
Because some people don't even know there's a 1-800 suicide number. They don't know that there's someone that they can talk to 24/7. They don't know that there are people who are trained and qualified and will actually listen to their story. Yeah. Have you called the number before?
I haven't called the number, but I've used a texting kind of hotline number.
Okay.
Actually, last year a couple of times. So last year around this time, actually tomorrow will be a year to the day, I actually attempted suicide. And since then, it's been kind of a full recovery process. But having those tools on hand, I think, saved my life in a way, because it was a kind of a last minute thing to kind of reach out um, around that really difficult time. And just having something there was extremely helpful to kind of pull me out of that place.
Yeah. What was your first step out of that? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I mean, like, first step, kind of mentally, or
Like whatever it was, like, you had the attempt,
yeah,
and then there's this moment where, and I want to, first of all, I think is powerful to note that, statistics will show that people who attempt, as soon as they're, like, especially for people who jump,
yeah,
like before they hit the ground, they go, oh crap, I really don't want to do this, and it's too late now.
yeah,
um, and and so if they jump and then they still live, they don't like crawl back up and then try to jump again. It's
yeah,
like, oh my god, I'm alive, let me figure this out.
absolutely.
And so what was your, like, that moment where you realized, like, oh, I'm gonna live?
Yeah.
Like, so, did you call the number immediately? Like, what was your?
So my boyfriend was actually home at the time, and kind of immediately after that had taken place, I just kind of had a kind of a flash realization that, you know what, like, I can't, it's not going to end here. Like, I
Mm,
have so much more to do. And it kind of, like, leading up to that point, everything was just so dark and so closed in, and that's kind of the only place where my mind was sitting. So that was kind of, I was just in that space. So when it actually happened, it was almost kind of like I woke up and was like, hold on, like, I can't, like, this isn't the right thing to do. So I'd actually gone to him, and he had driven me to the hospital, and I made the decision then to admit myself for inpatient treatment, which was a huge step, and it was very scary at the time. But looking back on it, it was one of the best things I've ever done for myself.
wow, that had to be scary. and,
Very.
and right, to admit yourself,
Yeah.
like, can you talk about why that was scary? Because, it's not like, if you cut yourself or break your leg, it's not scary to go to the hospital. Like,
No.
you're like, oh my god, get me to the hospital,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
But in this situation, what can you take us through those thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, in this situation, I was in a very vulnerable place. So, I mean, going to a big hospital full of people that I don't know, it's an unfamiliar environment, that was scary on its own. Admitting that, hey, I can't do this on my own, I need help, can
Mm,
also be a very scary thing. And then the idea of admitting myself into the inpatient program, meaning I'm not able to go home. I'm not able to kind of, it's a new environment that I'm going to have to get used to for a while.
mhm.
So that in itself was scary. And also, I mean,
Like, where can I charge my iPhone? Like,
we have systems in place, but it's, I mean, it took a while to get used to for sure. And I feel like even myself, kind of having experience with mental illness, I still had kind of those misconceptions about kind of psych units and inpatient treatments and that whole situation.
mm,
I know in a lot of movies and TV shows, it's kind of displayed as like, oh, just like the nut house, the crazy people. Like,
mhm.
it's often seen as a very sterile environment, and everyone's medicated, and you perceive it a different way. But actually being in an inpatient unit with other people that are experiencing the same things is was really, really eye-opening and totally different than what I expected.
So, different in what way? Gary Goldman has a new HBO special. I don't know. You know who he is?
No, I'm not.
Gary Goldman. He's a comedian and very successful,
Yeah.
but struggled with depression so much so that he stopped doing stand up and was like started working as like a youth counselor.
Okay.
But now has come back and he just released a HBO comedy special
Yeah.
called The Great Depression. And in that special, he talks about admitting himself to the psych ward and how it wasn't how it's been depicted in TV and movies. Can you talk to us about what your expectations were, like what you've seen, and then what it actually was?
I mean, from what I've seen and what I've heard, I mean, you think of one movie that comes to mind is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh,
So, it's very, you think of all these people running around, and it's crazy, and there's those
yeah.
and everyone lines up and they're doling out the medications, and it's just, you just have this idea in your head. But going in there, obviously it is still a hospital setting, but it's a lot more comfortable. I mean, there is definitely structure to it, but even just getting to know the people that I was in there with, I was inpatient there for almost a month. So you meet with psychiatrists daily, you kind of get on your medication regimen if that's kind of part of your treatment plan. The meals are kind of scheduled, but I feel like the biggest difference for me were just getting to know the people that I was hanging around with every day, because once you get to know them, everybody has their own story. There was people from all different walks of life that all kind of have the same goal in mind. We're all just trying to get better. And it definitely kind of took away from the kind of scary depiction of psych wards that are often portrayed.
Yeah, it's not like people running around banging their heads against the wall.
No one's in straitjackets.
Yeah.
Like you go in there and like everyone's in their slippers and pajamas and grabbing snacks from the fridge and playing cribbage at the table, and it's a lot more. They try to make it as comforting as possible, as close to home as possible.
Let's talk about what's really important.
Mm-hmm.
How was the food?
I mean, hospital food, not great, but I mean, they do what they can. I mean, you get your 3 square meals a day, you get your snacks. Definitely not my favorite food. I'd maybe give it like a 5 out of 10 on the rating scale, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad.
What was the first thing you're like, as soon as I get out of here? What was the thing you're like, I'm gonna go eat? What?
First thing to eat?
Yeah. What were you looking for?
Maybe like fresh vegetables.
Wow.
Fresh fruit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because they give you like the little Dannon cups, those little fruit cups.
And everything's kind of served on trays and it has your little name on it. And I think the funniest thing to me was, like, there's kind of always people coming in and out. There's a very limited amount of beds in the unit that I was on. So whenever someone was discharged, there would be a new person coming in right away. There was always kind of like a waiting list. So it was like, oh, that person's new. But once you've been there for a couple weeks, you kind of know the schedule of, like, say, the dinners every night.
Okay.
So they would serve kind of like a meat and potatoes kind of thing. And then, you knew the next night was going to be like a shepherd's pie, but they would just take leftover potatoes and put it on top of the meat, and it was like, oh, I bet you tomorrow that's what it's going to be. And it was kind of like, you get into that routine. But
what you talked about meds.
Yes.
So did the meds that they give you there, was that different than what you were taking? Were you taking meds before you went in?
I was.
Okay, and then did they change that at all?
They did, yeah, absolutely. Okay. So before I was admitted, before the attempt, I was actually started on a completely different medication that I had never been on before. So I had been on and off Prozac since I was about 14 years old. So that was like 6, 7, 8 years. And then I just found it wasn't working as well anymore. So I'd gone off it for a while. And then when things started to kind of slip in like the middle of last year, I was put on a new medication. And the doctor that prescribed me the medication had let me know that there might be some side effects. Usually with antidepressants, you feel a little bit worse before you start to feel better. So I had initially thought that was kind of what it was. So I'd gone back to the doctor and kind of explained the situation. And instead of taking me off of those, she bumped up the dose. And I feel like almost that switch in medication contributed to the increase in suicidal thoughts and the increase in the suicidal ideation. So as soon as I was admitted to the hospital, they took me off of those right away and said, you shouldn't be still on these. So
Wow.
I think it was kind of like a gap in kind of communication between the doctor that I was seeing at the time. Um, and I think it probably had a lot to do with kind of what happened.
What were the meds that because you said you two were taking Prozac
Yeah.
for years, and then what did she switch you to and bump
So
up?
at the time, I was put on Zoloft for a while.
What's a while?
Mm-hmm. So a while. So it was for like, it was a few months
Okay.
in.
Uh-huh.
And so once I was admitted to hospital, I was completely taken off the Zoloft, and then they put me back on the Prozac to kind
Gotcha.
of bring it back up.
So it's so. Do you feel like Zoloft was the issue, or was just the switching of the meds? You know, because I've heard that a lot where when people either completely stop taking their meds
Mm-hmm.
or they change their meds, that's when it becomes most dangerous
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
I mean, I had been off of, prior to starting on Zoloft, I had been off of the Prozac for about 6 months.
Okay.
So I feel like, I mean, I feel like I was already kind of starting to dip a bit before I even started on the Zoloft, and I feel like going on the new medication and then bumping up the dose kind of amplified those feelings.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Why were you off for 6 months? The Zoloft.
I was off of the Prozac for
Oh, Prozac. Why were you off for Prozac for 6 months?
just because like was kind of working with my doctor at the time before we
Okay.
actually moved to Kelowna,
Uh-huh.
and we kind of decided, okay, we're going to try kind of going off of them, and it was just kind of a trial thing just to see kind of what would work.
And what did you learn in the psych ward? Because I imagine, you know, like you said, everything's very regimented. They got you back on the Prozac, and then you have to go to therapy, right? Now, is there individual and group therapy?
Both.
There's both, right?
When you're in inpatient care, you are partnered up with your own psychiatrist. So there's a team of psychiatrists on the unit that are assigned to several different patients. So you have a one-on-one visit every single morning, which is super, super helpful. And they can kind of adjust. They can kind of check in with you as regards to medication, also do kind of some therapy. We did a lot of CBT, which was so helpful.
Cognitive behavioral therapy?
Yes.
Okay.
And super, super helpful. And then they also have group therapy. They have art classes. They have, I mean, it varies from unit to unit, but this unit they had little cooking workshops. They had little exercise, fitness classes. They have kind of daily walks. So they have little activities that kind of get people engaged.
Wow.
Which was fantastic.
So what did you take away from the individual?
From the individual, just kind of accepting the help, if that makes sense. I find before I went in, I would say I'm kind of a stubborn person as far as accepting help from others. I kind of want to be able to do things on my own, and I don't need other people's help. But just really finding that place to kind of admit to myself that, you know, like I need the help at this point. So accepting that help, learning a lot about myself from kind of like an outside point of view, like speaking with my psychiatrist and my therapist to kind of resolve those issues that I was having internally. I mean, we discussed absolutely everything from family to home life to like my hobbies and aspirations and everything, and just kind of getting to the root, and also developing strategies and coping techniques that I can take. I mean, the whole process of treatment in an inpatient center is preparing you for the outside world, preparing you to go back out and thrive and manage your illness.
All right. Well, quick note: when you see me looking down, it's because I'm writing.
That's
So
okay.
I don't want you to think I hate when I'm talking to somebody and like you're texting or doing something else.
That's okay.
The when you what was I? Where was my brain going? Group, individual, except. Was there an insight from your childhood that was brought up that you didn't realize? Meaning, like, so a lot of times we go through our life interpreting events one way,
Yeah.
right? And then as we get older and we talk to people or we talk to those people who are involved or whatever, we go, oh my God, I can't believe that that's what was going on.
Yeah.
Was there any of those revelations in individual or group that you feel comfortable sharing? Where you're like, oh my God, this whole time I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, kind of looking back on growing up, kind of my personality, how I interact with people, again, kind of putting up that defensive wall of like, I want to be independent, I want to be able to handle things on my own, and not being as open about my feelings as I should have. On one side, it was kind of like I didn't want to worry anyone, I didn't want to, so in a way I was trying to protect other people, but it was kind of damaging to myself.
You didn't want to be a burden. You didn't want to feel like a burden to others.
And that was a big thing. And I mean, it's almost like I cared about other people's feelings and other people's interpretations of me more than I did of myself, if that makes sense. Like I
Wow.
put all my energy out to other people,
Yeah.
but left no time or energy for my own well-being. So it's just kind of a matter of kind of bringing that perspective a little more inwards.
Yeah.
And thinking about me first before others.
I'm sure your boyfriend loves that. He's like, you should cook for me first. Now you're thinking about yourself. I don't know about this therapy. Do you have siblings?
I have 2 sisters, actually.
Oh my! So where do you fall in the age?
I actually have a twin sister.
Okay. Wow.
And a younger sister who's 2 years younger.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And then your parents are together, or okay. And so where did that come from then? Was there financial hardship, or why did you feel like you have to be so protective and put others first?
I feel like it's just kind of a caring nature. I mean, but I think I maybe took it a little too far. I mean, ever since I was young, it was always kind of, people would always say, "Oh, you're so mature for your age." Even when I was like 7, 8 years old, I was always very mature, very smart. And so it might have been a little bit of kind of that pressure to
live up to that image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of stemmed from there. I mean, home life was excellent. Like my parents, my sisters, a very loving family, very supportive parents. But I think it was just kind of my own internal hesitance to ever say that something was wrong because I didn't want to disappoint people.
Wow.
You know?
That is, I struggle with that too.
Mm.
I kind of grew up with the same kind of, you're so mature, you have an old soul. As a young man, he's growing up so fast. He's so smart. My mom was always comparing me and my sister in terms of saying, why can't you be like your brother, kind of thing. So I always felt this need to maintain a certain image, that kind of thing. And yeah, so you do and start to internalize these different voices, and then you kind of don't take time to figure out who you are and what you really want and what really motivates you to keep you going, right? So, but you did talk about how cognitive behavioral therapy was so helpful, and also you said coping strategies and techniques. Can you share lessons learned from cognitive? Can you talk about what that is first, because a lot of people don't know what CBT is, and then we can go into other.
I was so excited about it once I had my first session, because I was like, okay, this actually clicks and it's actually working for me. So CBT is kind of a process of analyzing your thought patterns and you're identifying things like cognitive distortions. So if you're having like intrusive negative thoughts or kind of reoccurring thought patterns, and it's just kind of taking those down and looking at them in a more analytic way. So one of my favorite things that I still do is journaling. And so say I get a negative thought that pops into my head, like I'm going to this interview or for a lovely podcast, and a thought pops into my head saying, oh, you're not good enough for this, or you're gonna mess up, or it's taking that thought, putting it down on paper and looking at it as, why do I feel this way? And what are the truths that I can put against that thought? So if I'm thinking from like a relationship standpoint, if I get an intrusive thought saying, oh, my friends don't really care about me, I can put that thought down and say, you know what? That's not true at all, because my friend called me this morning and I'm going for coffee with another friend tomorrow. So they obviously care. So it's almost a way of counteracting those irrational thoughts, and kind of makes you look at it in a different way instead of absorbing yourself into kind of that negative mindset.
No, it completely makes sense. I have a podcast titled "Interrogate Your Feelings," because a lot of times, our thoughts and feelings aren't valid and are based on, stuff that's happened, obviously, past experiences, what other people think and believe, or society's expectations. And it's like, hold on, that's not, that black or white thinking is what happens, right? When we get into that fight or flight mode.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, you have to get in there and be like, is this true? And, oh, that's not true. And so that you can reclaim your own power. Journaling is so powerful. And I think a lot of people, I remember like when I was in high school, I didn't journal, my professors, I had an English professor who was like, you got to journal and turn it in every week. And I hated it. And I was like, because to me, a journal was all about writing down your emotions. And I was like, I don't know how I feel. I'm a 14-year-old boy, it's so ridiculous. But, now I use journaling to just write anything. It doesn't have to be emotional. It doesn't have to be thoughtful. I'm not Thomas Jefferson where, because ink and paper was so limited and valuable, like I had to really think about every word. It was like, I'm just writing down gibberish half the time, just getting stuff out of my head and onto the paper. So yeah, because you realize even in journaling, you bring that perfectionism to it. Like, I don't want to mess up my journal. It's so ridiculous. It's like, this is the one place where you should just be able to dump and vent and
it helps so much too when you can come back, and if I'm having an episode or I'm feeling really anxious, I can go back to the journal and say, okay, I had this thought before, and you can go back and review and kind of see, okay, what are the reoccurring patterns? What did I do last time to help me feel better? What can I use to kind of mend that? And it's such a useful tool to have on hand. So I carry my little book with me around.
Because what I'll do is I'll write down what I did, whether I binge ate or just laid around all day and was kind of lazy or cried or got angry, whatever I did. And then later on, I'll come back and then write what I really wanted. Like, what did I really need in that moment? It's like, you didn't really want a whole bag of Oreos. What is it that you really, and so like before I used to judge what I did. I used to be like, why'd you do that? That was so dumb. Now I'm like, here's what you really needed. And here's what you could do next time. And so then over time, you start to rewire and reprogram yourself versus judging yourself, which, I love doing. It's kind of fun to judge other people, but it's not so much fun when you do it to yourself. So besides the journaling, what are your other coping mechanisms? Oh, you know what? And before you answer that, do you have journaling techniques or or do you like journal first thing in the morning, at night? Do you have little things that?
I find either first thing when I wake up or right before I go to bed, kind of
Mhm.
the best times for me. Usually right before bed is kind of a good time for me to do it, just because I can kind of like unload all my thoughts from the day,
Gotcha.
and it kind of clears my head, and then I usually sleep better. Um, so for some people that works. From a creative standpoint, I also sometimes journal first thing in the morning. If I kind of wake up and I have an idea for something, I'll journal that down. So a little bit of both, but usually either first thing in the morning or like last thing before bed.
I like the idea of that. Like it's, from a creative standpoint, first thing in the morning, but from an emotional, mental,
Hmm.
last thing at night. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so then, what else are you? What other coping strategies do you have?
I find meditation actually pretty helpful.
Okay.
So I actually use an app that I actually started using it when I first went into the hospital. I'm still using it today. It's an app called Simple Habit,
Uh-huh.
and it is absolutely fantastic. It is a collection of guided meditations. So you can basically go on this app. You can say, okay, I have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long you have, what you're doing at the moment. So you can pick one if you're commuting to work, if you're going for a walk, if it's like SOS, I need to calm down right now. And it gives you so many different options for so many different scenarios. And you just pop your headphones in, listen to it, and it just makes you feel so much better.
Let me ask you this, because I use a app also called Insight Timer. And,
Mhm.
and it's great that they have all these options, but I find that sometimes that creates anxiety of like, which one do I want? This 10-minute one, the silent, or do I want a 10-minute
Yeah.
guided? Oh my God. So then I just end up using just the timer. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just going to set it for 10 minutes and see what
Yeah.
happens.
I mean, and it's different for everyone. Like some people
It is,
prefer
yeah.
the silence, um, and sometimes I still do. Sometimes I just meditate without any distractions. I'll just set like a 10-minute timer on my phone and set it aside,
Mhm.
and just kind of focus on my breath, and that'll help. But I find for me, like the guided meditations, if I had a stressful day at work or
Mm.
I'm kind of winding down before bed, sometimes those guided ones can just kind of help you get into that relaxed space a little bit easier.
And that's a great point too, that I find that if I'm calm and I go into meditation,
Mhm.
I don't need a guided meditation. But if I'm kind of anxious, stressed, long day, exhausted, then it's beneficial. I never thought about it like that until you just said that. That's interesting because I meditate also. Um, and so use a simple habit
Yep.
and you journal and then what else? Going back to that cognitive behavioral. So they're talking about like challenging your thoughts. Is there anything else from the CBT that you've incorporated or learned?
I mean, that would like journaling was probably the biggest thing that I did take from it.
Okay.
But also just being kind of aware of my emotions, kind
Okay.
of being with myself throughout the day. I mean, especially with anxiety, it can be hard to kind of sit down and say, okay, how am I feeling right now? Sometimes the whole day can just blur together and it's just
Yeah. Yeah.
one big crazy anxious mess, and
Right. Right.
it's hard to kind of sit with yourself and check in and just be, okay, how am I feeling right now? Do I need anything right now? You almost have to kind of parent yourself in a way, like, do you need a glass of water?
Wow.
You know? So just kind of being that mindfulness and that kind of self-awareness, and it takes a lot of time. It was really hard for me to kind of get the hang of.
Yeah.
But once I did, I found it to be super helpful because I could identify, okay, you know what? I just need to sit down for a few minutes and like maybe I'll do a little meditation. Maybe I'll go for a walk right now. Like kind of knowing what I need in that moment
Yeah.
to kind of help if I'm feeling anxious or overwhelmed.
What do you do for work?
So I do most of the illustration.
Right. Right.
So I do a lot of freelance work, um, obviously all my personal work and selling prints and stuff like that. And then I do work part-time at a cafe.
Love it. Yeah, I love your Instagram shop Sunday. Sunday spelled Sundae. And some of the quotes that you've posted are like, take what you need today. I really love that one because um, there's so many times like where you need something, you don't know what it is. Like you said, you don't know it's like, I feel off right now. Do I need a hug? Do I need motivation? Do I need me time? Do I need laughter, fun? To me, that's one of the things that I realized, like, these past couple of days, I was like, I feel really overwhelmed, and I realized I've done everything except have fun. I haven't just or just allowed for breathing room, for activities in my life. It's like you said, we schedule everything for everyone else, and we don't schedule anything for ourselves. And then the day builds up, and then we're like, why am I so stressed? And it's like, well, you didn't hang out with yourself for a little bit.
One of my all-time favorite quotes that I actually kind of use as kind of a guide through my recovery process was, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
So you can't help other people in the right way and support other people if you're not filling your own cup first, if you're not taking care of yourself first.
Absolutely. It's like that. It's like when you're on a plane, they say, put the mask on yourself first.
Yep.
This other one you have, you talk about, looking at your Instagram post, and it says, setting boundaries is self-care. Setting boundaries is so hard.
It is so hard.
So have you learned how to set boundaries there in therapy, or and if you have, in what ways have you, what's a way that you had no boundaries and you're like, I'm putting my foot down?
So that was a really hard thing for me, just because, with kind of my like caring, compassionate side growing up, even from a young age, I didn't want to disappoint people. So I kind of said yes to everything. And I made commitments that even if I didn't feel 100% about, I still wanted to do it because I know it would make someone else happy. Even like going to events that maybe I wasn't too excited about, but I just wanted to go for the other person.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a lot about kind of personal boundaries. So saying no to things that I don't feel comfortable with. One big thing last year when I was actually in treatment, since it was around Christmas time, was actually making the decision not to go home to Calgary to visit my family for Christmas that year.
Wow. Why did you make that decision?
Just because I felt like I needed that time. Like I was discharged from the hospital about a week before Christmas. So for me, it was a really hard decision to make, because obviously my parents wanted me to come home, and it was kind of that, oh, you're going to come home, it's going to be great, you're going to see all the family. But I just didn't feel ready at that point to kind of see everyone. I kind of wanted that time to come home and recoup and kind of resettle in. So that was a big kind of boundary I had to set, and sit my parents down over the phone and tell them, you know what, like, I'm not, like, I want to be home, but just for my health and for my recovery, I'm not going to be home this year, but I will be home like a month later. So it was just kind of coming to that kind of agreement in a way, but that was a big thing.
Yeah, a lot of us who, grew up in big families and friends, we the family always wants to be around. And if you're more of and I'm going to assume you're probably more of an introvert also, and for introverts, we recharge by being by ourselves, or with books, or, little in a little corner of a coffee shop, or out in the woods, things like that. And it's hard for our families to understand that, they take it, they could take it as like a rejection or something.
Definitely. And I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I didn't want them to be disappointed that I wasn't coming home, but it was just a decision I knew I had to make for myself in order to not disrupt my recovery process.
Right. And so with your meds now, what are you taking right now?
Currently, I am still on the Prozac.
Okay.
A different dosage than what I was even before the Zoloft. So right now I'm on 40 milligrams of Prozac.
Wow. Okay.
Mhm.
and you feel stable? Any side effects, any sleep disturbances, any?
No, not really. I
Um,
mean, I've never really had an issue as far as side effects
okay.
with Prozac specifically.
Mhm.
I mean, there's always that kind of adjustment period, but it was nice to be able to go through that period while I was still in the hospital under kind of like supervision of my doctor.
Right, right.
So that was really nice. But since, I mean, no major issues. I mean, it's medication for me is only one part of the puzzle. Um, I find kind of like the self care and mindfulness practices and CBT and all that stuff is another huge chunk. So, kind of working on both of those things in tandem is what kind of pulls everything together and keeps me at like a good level.
And then is you said you have a twin sister.
I do.
Is she struggle with any of the same things also? Not to put her business out there, but to um,
No, I'm the it runs more on my dad's side of the family. So
got
my
you.
dad has depression as well. So
Yeah.
it was just kind of me and him. And then, I mean, his side of the family, he has four sisters. So I think all of them have depression. So it's a pretty prominent thing throughout
Yeah.
my family, but neither of my sisters have much experience with it. So that was kind of tricky to kind of explain because it can be a hard thing to explain to someone that hasn't experienced it themselves.
Absolutely. But to me, that was one of the things that made me take my mental health more seriously is to realize, oh, not everybody feels like this,
Hmm.
you know, but also to realize that I'm not the only one who feels like this. It's just that this isn't this isn't typical.
Yep.
And this is something I really need to look at like I would any type of injury or physical pain versus I'll get over it,
Yep.
or you sleep it off or something like
Your
that. So,
band-aid on it, good to
yeah,
go.
absolutely. Was there and and a lot of mental health there's talk about how foods affect mood and behavior and things like that. Was there any of that discussed while you were in treatment or been discussed with your therapist?
A little bit. I mean, they kind of take a look at kind of overall health, so like
Yeah,
physical wellness, so your diet, your amount of exercise you're getting daily.
gotcha.
And I mean, they're all kind of little pieces of the puzzle. They're all kind of contributors to overall health. So looking at diet is definitely a big thing. They said, I know a lot of kind of highly processed foods, a lot of sugar, a lot of salt
Mhm.
can actually like accentuate symptoms of anxiety.
Yeah.
Um, so definitely kind of tweaking my diet to kind of more plant-based foods, keeping hydrated, kind of stuff like that, definitely helps in a lot of ways.
What I think I got off track in terms of or we talked about boundaries a little bit, but
Mhm.
so how has it changed the dynamic in your relationship now after treatment?
I
Um,
think it helps a lot. I mean, again, I was always kind of, I felt like I was putting all of my energy out towards the people in my life
yeah,
and kind of neglecting myself
yeah,
in a way, kind of emotionally. So I feel like having set those boundaries, things are a lot better because now, I mean, my boyfriend understands kind of what I'm dealing with and he's kind of more aware of kind of my own process. And if I need kind of time to myself, he respects that.
mm,
And it's just kind of a good balance. And it's kind of educational for him in a way too, because obviously it's especially with anxiety. I can say, oh, I'm feeling anxious, but he might not know exactly what that means. But
absolutely.
having those boundaries set in place where I'm explained to him straight up, like if he's like, oh, let's go to a movie and I'm just not really feeling like going out that night, if I say I don't feel like going to a movie, he understands that, okay, it's just let's just stay home instead.
Yeah,
And there's that kind of that's definitely increased communication,
right.
which of course I think communication is a huge piece of any relationship.
Yeah, because now you have tools of how to like be more specific in terms of how you feel, so then you can communicate with him. And I also wonder if it's a thing of where, if you two can't go to the movies, then he either goes by himself or he goes with his buddies, or so because I find that that's in a lot of relationships. Like it's like one person wants to see the movie, the other person doesn't want to see the movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, well, we don't have to, we can find something else to do together, or I can go see this thing that I really want to see, and then you do something else, and then we can, come back together. It doesn't have to be this hip by hip type of dance.
Yeah.
How long you guys been together?
It'll be, oh gosh, it'll be 6 years.
Wow.
Right.
Well, kudos to him for taking you to, driving you there and still being there and adjusting and learning and being willing to show up for you and you being willing to learn. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to share with the shop Sunday, or with the message you want to get out there?
Trying to think of something specific. I mean, the reason why I started Shop Sunday was mostly kind of as a way to process my own feelings and emotions, and to kind of take these kind of positive reinforcements and these quotes and these positive phrases that I would tell myself every day and turn them into art pieces, which is, I've always been a really creative person, so it was kind of something natural for me to do. But just seeing it kind of grow into almost a community of people that kind of resonate with the work. And I mean, I'll get messages from people saying like, thank you so much for sharing this. Like, I needed this today.
Yeah.
And just knowing that I can obviously like make a decent living from doing what I love. I can do what I love every single day, and I can help people at the same time is incredible. And the fact that I can use kind of my creative passions to spread awareness about more difficult topics like suicide, but in kind of a more approachable way and kind of a fun way, just means the world, because it means that like the awareness is there and the conversation can keep going.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be so serious. This talk around mental health and even suicide. I talk about it in my stand-up, and it's tough because people think, automatically because I'm a comedian that I'm trying to make fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, we have to be able to discuss these things even in a lighthearted manner. I mean, when you read a lot of the stories, some of it is humorous and even the thought of, I think about the moments where, that have made me call the 800 suicide number. And then I look back and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, that was so like, it's so ridiculous, and so, and like I said, not to say that it's all humorous, but I'm saying that there's always some humor somewhere in the story, and in order for us to get the message out there, it doesn't have to be with this heavy fist and this clinical, speak.
Just make it more, it makes it more accessible to people
Absolutely.
that otherwise might not be super open to talking about
Yeah,
it.
and because you want to get kids talking about it,
you want to make it relatable.
Yeah.
And you want to normalize discussion on mental health the same way, like if someone broke their leg, they broke their leg.
Right.
And it shouldn't be any different from someone that is diagnosed with depression or anxiety. It's an illness. It's something that can be treated. It's not anything that people should be ashamed of. And I think mental health should be treated like any other physical illness.
Is there a way that depression and anxiety feel different to you?
To me, they're almost like they're pretty opposite.
Okay.
I find they're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, but one thing I learned actually in group therapy while I was in treatment was kind of the sliding scale. So they call it the window of tolerance.
Okay.
So your baseline is kind of where you're feeling good, you're feeling neutral, and then on either side, on top and bottom, you have your window of tolerance. So if you go above your window of tolerance, then you are in the anxiety zone. And if you go below your window of tolerance, you kind of fall into that depression and that depressive state. So it's using those coping mechanisms to kind of find and stay within your window. But what I had no idea was when the therapist was talking to the group, she said, how many of you feel anxious? And I put my hand up. And then she said, how many of you feel depressed? And I also put my hand up. And I'm like, how can I feel both of these things at the same time?
Yeah.
And basically what she explained was, if you go too high above your window of tolerance and you're in the anxiety state, if you get too high, it makes you drop all the way down to the bottom. So you can get so anxious that your body just kind of shuts itself off and you get into that depressive state. So they definitely kind of interact. I'd never thought of it that way.
Wow, that makes sense, because you get so anxious, you get so worked up, you're like, huh, huh, huh.
Your body's just kind of like, okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's interesting because, when I think back to when I was younger, and, people were like, oh, what'd you do? And I was like, I just came home and crashed. And I realized crashing is not a good thing.
No.
Like you don't want a plane to crash. You don't want cars to crash.
No.
But somehow that crashing is like, oh, I just crashed at the end of. It's like, oh, that's not. You can't keep doing that. Like, that's not healthy. That means you're wearing yourself out constantly, and eventually you're gonna burn. So that's not good. Was there anything else? Any other takeaways from? Because are you going to individual therapy now?
I'm actually not currently in therapy.
Okay.
I have looked into it a little bit. I did work with my psychiatrist outside of the hospital when I left the hospital, and we kind of saw each other once a month or so just to kind of follow up. And then we kind of came to a decision where it was kind of good enough for me to kind of transition over just to my regular family doctor.
Yeah.
As far as medications and things. So that's kind of what I've been doing now, but it's mostly just kind of self-awareness and kind of self-care that has been kind of the most helpful for me at this point.
Yeah.
But obviously knowing that I have access to a therapist and that kind of treatment is obviously super helpful if I need it, when I need it.
You talked about journaling before bed. Do you have, that was the thing I wanted to ask you about, the journaling before bed and like your bedtime routine.
Yes.
Right. Because you mentioned early in the beginning about having systems in place. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about your bedtime routine and then highlight what you meant by having systems in place?
So, I mean, for me, routine has been really helpful with managing my anxiety. Mm-hmm. I find kind of things happen and routines change and stuff, but having certain things in place as kind of constants, I find really helpful. So a bedtime routine for me would be kind of putting away the electronics about an hour before bed, kind of turning some of the lights down, obviously like washing up, getting some comfy clothes on, maybe doing a little bit of reading, just kind of winding down, and finding ways to kind of relax before bed, whether that's doing a bit of meditation, doing a bit of journaling, reading a little bit, just kind of getting into that space where I can rest.
And then what are the systems that you have in place? Because I do the same thing. Like, I find that if I journal before bed, and then also read, like TV, I used to think TV was relaxing. Like, I'm just going to veg out and watch. And it doesn't relax me at all. It's just more wound out. Yeah.
And they say too, with a lot of technology, like the blue light from screens can disrupt your sleep cycle. So it's a really good thing to kind of make your bedroom kind of a tech-free zone. Mm-hmm. So even charging your phone in another room of the house can be helpful. Then you're
That's why people buy an alarm clock.
Yes. But then you're not tempted to roll over and scroll, which I mean I still do occasionally, but it's kind of a good rule of thumb to get into the habit of that. But as far as kind of daily routines go, I'm usually pretty good at planning some sort of exercise, whether that's going to the gym, going for a walk throughout the day, making sure to drink enough water, taking little breaks for meditation if I need them, obviously carrying my journal in my bag with me when I go out, and obviously having that app right on my phone. I always have my headphones in my bag, so if I need that little break, even if I'm out in public at a coffee shop, I can pop them in and do a quick session and kind of bring myself back to neutral.
And for the listeners out there too, one of the things I do is, because sometimes I don't always have my journal with me. is I do two things. I keep a book in the car because I find that when I'm waiting for something or someone, I get very anxious,
Yeah.
and reading a book kind of grounds me. Um, and the other thing I do is I won't necessarily journal on my phone, but like the notes app in your iPhone, I will just make 10 observations, just like 10 things that I see, smell, hear right now, and just to kind of center myself and ground myself. And that usually calms me down if I'm feeling a bit anxious. So the journaling doesn't have to be these long sentences or paragraphs.
Oh,
Sometimes you could just take notes about what you see, smell, taste, touch.
there's actually an app I have on my phone as well. It's called Mood Space.
Mood space. Okay.
And it's exactly that. So if I don't have my actual journal and a pen with me, they have different segments to it. So there's a meditation segment where you can do little guided meditations. There's a thought diary where you can actually challenge your thoughts
Mm.
specifically. So you can go into the app, and I don't know if you can see this. So you can type
Oh, yeah.
what happened, what were your thoughts, how did this make you feel, how intense were the feelings.
Wow.
You can make note of how you're feeling, and then you can challenge those automatic thoughts. And it gives you, it's kind of like a little thought diary in a way.
So it takes the thinking out of it's asking you the
Yeah.
questions. That's the hardest part, is like, what do I journal? Where do I start? And that's giving you kind of a framework.
Yeah, so it's amazing to have on hand.
I love that. Are there any other apps that you use uh,
Um,
in the mental health space?
I think those two
Okay.
are my kind of go-tos. So Simple Habit for the meditation, and then Mood Space for kind of the thought journaling.
And you talked about like you like to read.
Mhm.
Is there something you're reading now, something you've read that was very powerful or resonated with you?
There was one book. Let me just see if I can find it again. It's called First We Make the Beast Beautiful.
Oh, I like the title.
Hmm. So that is by, so it's centers around anxiety. So it's by Sarah Wilson. It's a kind of an autobiography. And I actually read that while I was in treatment. So it was a book that I had with me while I was in the hospital.
Mm.
And it was just so amazing because she really goes into a deep dive of her own experience with anxiety.
Hmm.
And it was such a relatable thing, kind of going through the similar feelings and feeling that kind of relatability to the way she tells her own story. And she kind of does it again in kind of a lighthearted, a little bit humorous way.
Yeah, yeah.
So it makes it a little more comfortable. And yeah, it's an amazing book. I would definitely recommend it.
Fantastic. First, you make the beast beautiful. I will list that in the apps that Hayley's mentioned in the show notes. Hayley, is there anything else you want to share with us? Anything we didn't talk about? Anything? Where can people find you? You talked about your community of Shop Sunday. Is there a name for your tribe of Shop Sunday people, or?
No specific names.
Okay.
Do you have any ideas?
I'm not good with. I have a buddy going on a comedy tour, and he was like, "What should I name?" I was like, I just sent them like the worst names. Uh, but you know what usually happens is it happens organically.
Yeah.
Some point, somebody posts a comment, or you say something off the cuff or something like that, and then all of a sudden you're off and running.
Yeah.
And those are the best ways to figure out the name.
Totally.
Is it so? Is there like a Facebook community? Is it just through Instagram or what?
Mostly through Instagram, actually.
Okay.
That's kind of where I started, and that's kind of where, I post almost all of my personal work there.
Okay.
So that would kind of be the best place to kind of reach out. And of course, like my DMs are always open for anyone kind of have any questions or looking for a little extra support. Obviously, I'm not a licensed therapist, but I'm always willing to be an open ear for people if they need it. And yeah, you can check out my Etsy shop if you need a little uplifting artwork in your life. I have some prints on there. And then, of course, I am open for freelance work. So I've done kind of a little bit of everything for people, kind of some branding work, graphic design work, and I'm just kind of always open to fun new projects. And of course, people with like-minded ideas and brands centered around wellness and self-care are really big, important things for me. So that's always fun.
I love it. I love it. And you have a website or just the Instagram?
I do have a website. So it's sundaystudios.ca.
Okay. And I'll link that also, Sunday Studios. Oh, I like that. .ca. Love it. Love it. Now, I always ask this, and like you said, you're not a licensed therapist. But I ask this of everybody who joins in. I always just feel like there's someone listening who's on a precipice of completing suicide. Before you kill yourself, what would you say to that person?
Before you kill yourself, I would say to try and look a little bit deeper inward. I feel like within all of us, underneath all those negative feelings and those really heavy emotions, there's always that little part of you that wants to live, that wants to thrive, that wants to continue. So really try and dig deep and look for that little light, that little glimmer of something special. Because things do get better, even if they don't seem like they will right now. It's a process and it's hard, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you will get there. I got there. But yeah, just always look for the good things, especially within yourself.
We forget the good things in ourselves. Hayley, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone who listened, remember that this podcast is not a substitute for you calling that 1-800-SUICIDE number. It's not a substitute for admitting yourself into treatment, for talking to a therapist, for you using an app. There's BetterHelp. There's so many, you can text. There's so many anonymous ways for you to reach out and get help in online services. And your story deserves to be heard and wants to be heard. And you're not alone, as we've shared throughout this episode. Hailey Kennedy, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So much. This was great. Thank you, listeners, for listening in. And we will talk to you soon. Peace.